Hey y'all,
What's going on, everyone?
I'm Jay,
And I'm Chris the Bird Nerd,
and we
and we
are
are
the
the
Bird
Bird
Brain.
Brains.
But
To say, it sounded really good on my end, so
it did sounded good for me too.
hopefully it'll come through all right for you guys. We're getting a little bit better. I know Jay, you'd mentioned a few podcasts back that you'd gone back and looked at some of our earlier episodes when we started out, and it was just terrible. And
Yeah,
it's still. I mean, that's just our dad signature.
we're not gonna
It's
stop.
not.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's like we love it. That's who we are. It's a part of our podcast now. But hopefully, we've gotten a little bit better at it. We've had some
yeah,
practice.
because what this will be episode what
Like
63?
50, no 60. Yeah, man,
63.
we're cranking through them. I think when did we start, Jay? Was it? I don't even remember what
Uh,
month. Was it like kind of like May or March or it was earlier this year. I just can't
I
remember
can look.
exactly when, but coming up on a year mark here for these podcasts. It's pretty cool.
This is episode 3. Was end of February. I guess we started them in February,
Okay, yeah, just a couple
somewhere in
months
there,
out.
January, February time frame.
Very cool.
No, I guess it had to be January, actually.
I think it was January 'cause I think I
Yeah.
remember us like we had touched base around Christmas time and it started talking and then it evolved into the podcast January time and when we decided to dive into it.
I'm glad we did. This is very
Yeah,
fun.
me too. We need to get us some more guest speakers. We haven't had a guest speaker for a while. Maybe those who are on there, listeners, if you guys are interested in being a guest speaker, we'd love to highlight you guys and highlight your birds and maybe some of your breeding successes that you've had in different species that you breed, whether it's larger parrots, small finches like Jay and I. We'd love to kind of mix it up a little bit. So let us know. Drop some comments down or PM us and see if we can get you on and maybe get some guest speakers going up here these next couple months.
Yeah, I've got a couple I can think of um, that we might want to do. And then I know, I guess I haven't really talked about this yet on the podcast. I know we've talked about our wives. I know also my mom
Oh, no, yeah, oh
s-
yeah.
said she'd be willing to come on. So that would be a fun one for you, I would think.
My mom would be a hoot. I love my mom. You're the best, and she does watch these. So if you're listening,
Yeah,
mom,
my
love you.
my mom does too. So I appreciate that. So it'd be fun to get her on. She's the reason I am how I am about animals, good or bad.
Yeah,
Take that for what it's worth.
yeah.
Um, so that and then again, I mean, I think my number one is I just want to get the wives on. It,
I know we need to do
basically,
that. I, I think we just need to say yes. Let's just do it, and let's just make it happen. So
yeah, my wife, she says yes in principle, but it's never like I'm busy or whatever. So we need to lock down a date like a week out and be like, we will
yeah,
be
my
podcasting then.
my wife this week actually had applied to several universities. She's going looking to go into nurse practitioner school, and a couple of the universities had her do like online virtual interviews. And I told her, I said, it's just gonna be like the podcast. Like, just look into the camera. You're gonna talk to yourself. It's gonna feel goofy, but you're gonna do awesome. So she got a little bit of practice this week. I set up my camera. I mean, basically the setup that I have here, and I sat her down. I said, "Okay, talking to the camera, and I'm gonna ask you a bunch of questions." And she's like, "I feel so weird." I said, "Well, at least in the podcast, you'll really be talking to someone else." Whereas, Jay and I, when we post our other videos, we're really just talking to ourselves in hopes that you guys listen.
Yeah,
But yeah,
it's still weird. I think about sometimes like so I made a video today. I fixed some the backside of the aviary that's in my neighbor's yard, which should be posted by the time this is posted. So I made a quick video on that day. It's kind of I got about a third of the way done. Was like, oh shoot, I should probably film this. I haven't done a personal video in a minute, so
yeah,
just haven't had time. So, um, but I was thinking like what am I going to explain to my neighbor if she looks outside and I'm just in her backyard filming this project, talking to myself out
yep,
loud? And then like think back to like archaeologists, or whatever, if digital media even still exists, like somebody watching these in 100 years, and there's just this crazy bird guy talking to himself.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny, believe it or not. No, I'm pretty introverted. I don't like to express myself. And the first 2, 3 years, Jay, of me posting on YouTube, I did it pretty secretively. I mean, like I was just in the bird shed, usually when like people weren't home or whatnot. And I've evolved a little bit. And now it's like my surrounding neighbors, they know, like even lots of times when I'm filming and showing the aviary, they'll poke their head over the fence and still say hi to me and be like, "Oh, filming for, YouTube and whatnot." I'm like, "Yep." But so it's getting a little bit better. I feel a little bit more comfortable with it, but still, it's a work in progress. But
Yeah, I mean, I would actually say like it's almost a job, right?
yeah,
It really is a
yeah,
job. But and I don't do it. I definitely don't like the way I sound on camera. I don't do it because I like to hear
yeah.
my own
No,
voice.
me
But
neither.
what I love about it is the community, like the people that I mean, you, right? But
Totally.
the people
Yep.
I've met, I talked to Tony Arnold the other day. I mean, the
Yeah.
people I've met through, Aladdin, there's Charles Cole, there's Paul Jansen, tons of people that have been following the podcast and commenting for a long time,
Yeah.
or my personal, Instagram and YouTube channels for a long time. That is really, really cool.
Yeah.
I love this hobby. I think we obviously both do, but um, being able to help so many people, I had somebody, and I won't call them out. I know they watch these, but messaged me the other day and said, "Hey, look, I lost some birds. I need an honest assessment. Do I need to stop keeping birds?" And it was like, whoa, no, you
Yeah.
don't. Like it's hard. You got to work towards improvement. And like the video that you talked about, your personal video that you posted probably a week ago by the time this comes out, where you talk about the moving the cage mesh, but you also talked about it's like, I don't really need to do this, but it's
Yeah.
better, right? And that's
Yeah.
the same thing
Right.
for the video that I've posted this week. I don't really need to do it, but it's better. And right. So
Yeah.
it's like always striving to be a little bit better, do a little bit more for the birds, make it a little bit more perfect for them.
Yep.
Um, that's, it keeps me up at night thinking about it, and it gets me up in the morning ready to do it. So,
Yep. And I agree. And speaking of making videos, Jay, I know we had created a video, one of the first videos in our podcast, that a topic around keeping and breeding zebra finches, and we felt like we've had quite a few comments over these last few weeks about zebra finches, and so we kind of wanted to circle back around and do some updates on our zebra finches and breeding them in general, maybe answering some questions. And so I think for today's topic, Jay, we're gonna rehash the good old zebra finches, probably one of the most popular finches in the world, and hopefully answer some questions that we've been asked and give you some breeding tips.
yeah. And I just checked, by the way, it's episode 8.
Okay, yeah.
So, episode 8. Rehash. This one will be more breeding specific, I would say.
The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. Bird Brains, Bird Brains. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. The Bird Brains Podcast with Chris and Jay. Bird Brains, Bird Brains.
All right, before we get to zebra finches, though, we've got to talk about our sponsor.
Yeah, yeah.
You're going to see this probably the day after Black Friday is probably when I'll actually get around to posting this if history holds true. But go on the New Zooland website, go to Perchville, get yourself a Bird Brains perch box. You just saw our unboxing video,
Voila!
but they are awesome. They have all kinds of awesome stuff in them.
Got New Zealand.
Yeah, all kinds of
Here's
great stuff.
their info, newzealand.com. Got the Bird
Um,
Brains logo. I mean, yeah.
and it gives you a discount. You can use code BirdBrains, get 10% off. It
Yep.
gives you access to educational stuff on their site. It does all kinds of stuff. It gives you free shipping if you order more stuff. If you're going to get on there, which Perchville now, if you haven't caught an episode in a while, they are the one-stop shop for everything that we use that you need to really nail keeping finches, breeding zebra finches. Um, Hop on there, use code BirdBrains, go to Perchville on the New Zooland website, and then order what you need using code BirdBrains for 10%
And
off.
Jay, both you and I, we've pretty much for the most part come to an end in our breeding season. But right now is where we're revamping and restocking, right, as far as prepping for next year's breeding season. And so I think where New Zealand can really help you is going on and looking at the different products that they have so that you can start to restock. If you live in the northern Americas, right, most of us are in the wintertime. Our birds are probably not breeding unless you have them indoors on a separate schedule. But right now is the chance and the opportunity that I'm taking, Jay, to relook at what nest boxes I need and nesting baskets and nesting supplies and trying to restock throughout this winter waiting and resting period. So when we come back into breeding season next year, where I'm ready to go, I have everything I need and we can just put them in when the birds are ready and they can go to town. So great opportunity. Go out to New Zealand, see what they have, what supplies they have, subscribe to the Perch Box, and you can get a lot of those supplies on a monthly basis for a good price and in a collective manner together in a box, and keep your birds entertained throughout the wintertime, and also get ready for breeding season coming up if you live in the northern hemisphere. Southern hemisphere, you're probably in full breeding right now or getting close to getting into it. But yeah, it'd be great.
Yeah, and I know like Australia was a little different because of the rainy season and stuff, but as a general rule, all that holds. I was looking at what Tony Arnold was doing the other day, and
Yeah,
he's kind of like on our side. I don't know. We got to get him on the podcast and get him to explain it too, because maybe we've been explaining that wrong for that
yeah,
hemisphere. I'm
right.
I'm sure I'm right about my hemisphere. I'm not sure I'm right about their hemisphere. So
All right, Tony, I know you're listening, brother. Let's do
yeah,
this.
we got to get him on. So the uh, I mean, yeah, I just went through my nest boxes the other day. I had to throw away a bunch. So the to be able to restock that stuff, to get all your medications you might need, to get calcium supplements, nesting material, all those things in one spot. I mean, that's as good as it gets. So,
Yeah.
um, hop on there, do it. Use code BirdBrains, 10% off. I know how to make the little jingle thing now, so I'll be doing that. Um,
Sweet.
all right, zebra finches, breeding zebra finches.
Where do we want to start, Jay? I mean, we can look at it from a different uh, viewpoints and aspects. You've got single pair breeding for zebra finches. You've got a colony setting. You've got mixed aviary settings for breedings, right? And so, I think both of us have experience in all the above. So maybe let's start with breeding in individual cages. Maybe you've got a pair of zebra finches in your house that you want to breed, or a couple in a small cage in your house, whatever it is. Let's start there, Jay, in some things that we've done in the past to be successful in breeding zebra finches. And if you guys have watched our previous podcast videos, you know that zebra finches are an easy species to breed. That they're harder to get to stop breeding than to get breeding, but there are a few nuances that we want to cover, and there are some aggression varieties or stereotypes that you could say that the zebra finches may have, and how you can work around that. And I think both Jay and I, we successfully house our zebra finches in a mixed aviary. So there's ways around that and still be successful breeding your zebra finches. But let's start, Jay. You say you got one, maybe two pairs of zebra finches in a cage in your house. What are you going to do to successfully breed them and make sure you have a male and female to start with?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that I have a pair. The wild type, really easy to sex, right? So the males have an orange cheek. They have the barring on their chest and the brown flank marks with the white spots. The hens will typically be all gray. They won't have the orange. They'll just have kind of these eye paint marks, and then the rest of them is gray with just barring on the tail. Um, where it gets tricky is when you get into the color morphs, which I would say the majority of the zebra finches in the United States either have a color morph or
Yeah.
are carrying those genes in some
Yeah.
form or another.
Very few of them are pure strains, if any anymore in the United States.
Right. So that being said, as with the exception of black cheeks, which both the hen and the cockbird have the black cheek, but anything with an orange cheek is got the round circle, and I'll post a little picture here, is going to be male. The other giveaways for males, especially older males that are in breeding condition, and when I say older, I mean not babies, not juveniles, 9 months plus old. The males will have almost a red beak, whereas the females will only have the orange beak. Only the males sing. The males tend to be um, a little smaller on average, probably, but that doesn't. Some color morphs are also just smaller in general, so that's not perfect. And then
Yeah.
the females do more like chirping, more honking. Both species, both male and female, will honk, but the females do more of that. The males will do more sing. The only ones that
Yeah.
do singing.
Yeah.
So hopefully that helps clear that up. Maybe I just muddied the waters more than I cleared them up. Is it something I'm forgetting, Chris?
No, I think a general rule of thumb, if they've got an orange cheek or orange flanks on the side, you got a male. Females don't have anything but a black tear mark across their face for the most part. You get into mutations of pied. Many times pied genes will take away some of those markings. So males and females may be a little bit harder if you've got an all white pied zebra finch. But yeah, your males will sing, your females don't. They both make a similar honking noise, but your males will have an additional song and courtship that they'll do for the females. And they're not shy. They'll do it in front of you all day, every day. So it won't take very long for you to see which one's a male and which one's a female.
Yeah, I think that's right. Maybe another good way to say it is they're not shy. So, all right, so you got your pair. Like we said, there's kind of three different ways you could breed them, right? You can breed them as a solo pair, you can breed them colony, or you can breed in the mixed aviary. We've both done all three. We'll start with solo pair. I would say this is the easiest way to do it.
Yeah.
Just a pair in a cage by themselves. They tend to figure it out the quickest and the easiest. Um, the first thing I would start with would be to get your birds into breeding condition. Zebras kind of don't care themselves.
Right.
They'll breed out when they're out of condition. That being said, that is a recipe for problems. So that's going to lead to like lower fertility, chicks dying, tossing, like erratic behavior from the parents, like mom trying to fight dad, or dad
Calcium
trying to,
deficiencies,
yeah,
things like that.
dad building a nest on top of the eggs, all those
Yeah.
crazy things.
Plucking their chicks, things like that.
Yeah, so the first thing, and we've done episodes in the past about getting birds in a breeding condition, jump back, check those out. Um, that would be the first thing I would say is like, so get your birds in a breeding condition. So that means cuddle bone, that means egg food, that means everybody's synced up, that means a light schedule,
Yep.
all those things. I don't want to get too
Right
in depth because,
temperatures.
yeah, I don't want to have 100-minute long episode, but go watch the Getting Birds in Breeding Condition episode if you think this is maybe where you have a problem, which I would venture to say that's probably 80+% of the problems are right there.
Right. Right.
Once you do that, then I would provide them with a nest box and nesting material. Especially, you can tell when they really pair up. They'll sit together. They'll sleep together on the perch at night.
Very
They
social
don't,
birds.
yeah, they don't need a nest. They'll preen each other, all those things. They don't need a nest box until they're going to breed. That's another thing. And for zebras, like I just talked about, they'll breed out of breeding condition. So
Yeah.
if they have a nest, you're going to encourage that. So try not to encourage that until you're ready.
And you may even, before you put a nest box in the cage, Jay, you may see an egg show up in your seed dish. I mean, they are that willing and ready to breed, but just making sure that you hold them to a point where they truly are in breeding condition, and then introduce the nest box. Even if you have to remove a few eggs from the seed dish, you want to make sure that they're really good and ready to go for all around success with your chicks and with incubation periods and the health of your birds. So,
Right, absolutely. Yeah, so that would be the first thing. I'd get them in a breeding condition. Second thing is I'd put in the nest and the nesting material. Now, as far as nest boxes, zebra finches are not picky in the
yeah,
slightest. The only thing I would say is get a big enough one. Those little tiny, and I've got some, but those little tiny nest boxes that
the
are
tiny
only,
wicker basket nest boxes.
yeah, that are maybe the size of like a kiwi or a little bit bigger. Um, those are fine for a bird to sleep in or mess around with. Those are not big enough for a clutch of zebra finches, but if that's all you give them, that's what they'll try
They'll,
to use.
they'll make it work. And yeah, and typically your zebra finch clutches, I would say normally, I mean, 3 to 5 chicks per nest. That's a good average. I feel like
Mhm.
zebras are good parents, and so you have that little nest, and you got 4 chicks in there plus mom and dad. That's a pretty tight space. So try and go a little bit bigger on the nest boxes if you can.
Yeah, I think my record for zebras is 9
Yeah,
in a clutch, so those tiny ones aren't going to cut it. But any of the larger ones, the boxes, the my mason jar nest, and I've got a video, which this will be on my channel. I've got a video on my channel about nest boxes. I think we've done a podcast on the different nest boxes too.
yep, yep.
Um, so again, I'll refer you to that one for more in-depth stuff there. But they're not picky, and they're not picky on nesting material, with one exception. They do like to line the last bit of their nest is feathers.
Feathers, yep,
So if you don't provide them with feathers or something similar, you can use little pieces of tissue. You can use little pieces of toilet paper or paper towels. I don't like to do that because I find those get messier, but in a pinch, you
yep.
can use those. Go on Amazon, order Arts and Crafts white turkey feathers. They'll send you 100 for $5. You can cut them into smaller pieces, give them to the birds.
Yeah.
Um, Otherwise, they will pluck their mate or other birds to get those feathers. And then for nesting material, I mean, I use burlap strings that I cut. Coconut fiber is
Cocoa
great for them.
fiber.
That
Yeah.
decorative paper, like you can get in the perch box, works great. They'll build pretty much out. I mean, I've had them use fake greenery that they
Yep.
rip down in the aviary. So
Anything that they can fit through the hole of that nest box, they will. I've had them take used sticks of millet seed
I was going to say whole
and
millet sprays.
and line that in their nest box, and I'm usually pulling that back out. But yeah, anything they can fit through the hole of the nest box, they will.
Or halfway, right? And have
Yeah,
it hang out.
and maybe on the nesting material, Jay, just be cautious. Try not to use stringy materials, so yarn, line, or anything that can wrap around the toes of the birds or around the babies. Stay away from that. So try and use nesting material. Like cocoa fiber is great because it is stringy, but it very rarely, if ever,
It won't wrap.
wrap around the
Yeah.
bird's toes or legs and cut off circulation. So don't use string or yarn materials that can harm the bird's toes or feet or the chicks'.
Yeah. Anything that if you wrap around your finger, it stays is a no-go.
Yeah,
Um, okay, so you've got that. So then your male will start to build. And they are incredible builders.
yeah,
They will do nothing for the day or two it takes them to build their nest besides eat, drink, and build that nest. And again, I'll find a little old picture I have and post it here. But tiny little zebra finch this big makes a nest that's fills the nest
uh-huh,
box, right?
yep,
So they are incredibly industrious, um, and that we'll get to that in a second. But that can also cause a problem. So
yeah,
once you think that he's built a good nest, and you see her start to go in there a lot, pull the nesting material, right? Add some feathers, pull everything else, let him put the feathers in because she's going to start to lay. And a lot of male zebra finches, especially inexperienced
yeah. So
male
the
zebra
young
finches,
ones.
will just keep building. So she'll lay a clutch of eggs and he'll just build more nests on top.
Yep. And I've
And
even
that
seen them
is
do that for newly hatched chicks as well. So just
right.
be
So
careful there.
so that's a real problem. So pull the nesting material and then she'll lay. Experienced hens will lay their whole clutch, then sit. Inexperienced hens will often start sitting right away. Either way is okay.
Yeah.
It's not a huge problem, but from it's 13 days, give or take, from the day the egg starts getting incubated, which could be up to like 5 days after laying. So
Yeah.
pay attention. If she's in there all the time, she's incubating. If she just goes in and out every once in a while, she's not incubating yet. So 13 days from that, from when she really firmly starts sitting, and you can be able to candle at about 5 days, which we've talked about in other episodes too, but it's where you hold the egg up to a light and you'll see, at first you'll see little red veins, then you'll
Yeah.
see a big red dot, and then eventually the whole egg is like purple
Yeah.
and not see-through.
Yeah. And both parents, Jay, will share incubation duties. So male and female. Sometimes they'll be in there together or swap and take turns. Especially your more experienced males, I've seen them take a good portion of the incubation, sharing that incubation time with the female. So don't be alarmed if you see the male in there at one point and not the female, or vice versa. They take turns. They know what they're doing. If it's really warm outside, they'll take longer breaks
I was
from
about to
sitting
say
on the
that.
eggs.
Yeah.
So don't be worried that maybe you see them outside of the nest for 15 minutes. If it's warm outside, and they have like an internal thermometer. They understand. They know. When my zebra finches are breeding here late fall and it's cold outside, they're usually jumping back in the nest while I'm still in the process of feeding them, because they know it's cooler and their eggs are going to cool down quicker. Whereas in the summertime, they'll jump out and they'll both go and eat the egg food together for a good amount of time, and then the female or male will jump back in on the nest and sit down. So don't be too alarmed if they spend a little bit more time outside of the nest while they're incubating it. It's okay. It's natural. They usually are pretty good to have that internal clock of when they need to go back and sit on the eggs, and they'll both share those duties.
Right, especially first clutch. If the dad doesn't have other young to feed, they're usually very good parents all around, very good dad,
Yeah,
very good mom.
yeah,
Um, so they're tolerant of nest checks. Don't overdo it, but you can check. My rule of thumb on zebra finches is definitely no more than once a day. If you can handle it, none.
yeah,
If you just can't wait, not more than once a day, as minimally
yeah,
invasive as possible. A lot of times, if you really spook birds, they'll either abandon it or they'll toss chicks. If you're seeing those things happen, ask yourself honestly, have you been in their
right,
grill too much?
yeah. Well, and make sure, if you're breeding them inside your house, do you have the cage in a placement where they feel safe and they've got privacy? If you've got them in the middle of your living room that's high traffic, they're probably going to be a little bit more stressed and
With the
may
cat
toss.
walking
Yeah,
by
yeah,
or whatever, yeah.
and so just be aware of that. If you see your birds breeding or you want them to breed, put them maybe in a corner of your room, in a room that's maybe not as occupied, but they still get good natural sunlight and stuff like that. But yeah, be aware of the surroundings and the privacy that you provide. They are more forgiving birds, but you can still overdo it. And if they start tossing chicks or eggs, things like that, that's probably because they're stressed for some reason.
hmm Okay, so we go from there. So they've laid the eggs. That 13 days goes by. Chicks start to hatch. Like I said, if the mom's experienced, she'll typically sit all of them at the same time. So in about 24 hours, all of a sudden you have all of them. If she's less experienced or she got held up or whatever had happened, sometimes you'll have one hatch per day, or you'll have one or two, then a day, then one or two, kind of a thing.
Yeah,
It's not a perfect science. If you get to what you think is day 13 and no babies, don't throw those eggs away yet.
yeah,
I wait till day 18 or 19 till
yeah,
I'm really sure, sometimes even longer. Um, and then the other question I get all the time is, once you have the clutch hatch and they're starting to get older, what do you do with the eggs that didn't hatch? I leave them in the nest until all the babies fledge. The reason for that is even the unhatched eggs are a great heat sink to help the
Yep.
babies stay warm.
Yep.
So you can leave those in. You don't need to remove them. You know, if they get a crack or something and they get gross, then you can remove them. But you know, it's not. There's not a lot of yolk
Yeah.
in there.
They also act when the chicks are really young, they act as a good barrier between the mom and the chicks so they don't get crushed. I mean, usually
Smushed.
zebra finches are pretty good at that. Or many times the younger chicks will use the eggs as like a tool to kind of prop their heads up on and things like that. So they can be beneficial there. And usually, your more experienced zebra finch pairs, I find that day one and day two of those chicks hatching, mom and dad are a lot more reluctant to move to leave the nest. So usually, if you go in to feed them, when they're incubating, lots of times they'll jump off. If I'm feeding them and giving them egg food, and the mom and dad don't leave the nest, and they know that I'm literally staring right through the hole, um, usually that's a good sign that you've got chicks that are hatching or have hatched. They're a little bit more
Mhm.
reluctant to leave. Gooley and finches are very similar with that too. When their chicks just hatch, many times you can lift up the nest box lid and they'll still sit there on their chicks and just look up at you and kind of defend. But
Yeah, and okay, so the next thing, so you've got these chicks. So the chicks for the first day don't actually need any food at all. They've still got the yolk in their body and they're absorbing it. Day two-ish, which, you know, again, that doesn't mean mom and dad won't feed them. It just means they don't need to, so don't panic yet. The first day that they feed them, it is so little that you can barely see it in their crop on the side of their tongue. You know, you're talking about a thing that's an
like a
inch
pin
long,
drop,
if that.
yeah,
Yeah, they'll feed, the way I would describe it is like one block of rock candy or like a big chunk of like Himalayan salt. It's just, you know, just a drop of food. And then they'll progress. The birds grow fast. The feeding increases fast. That's when you want to make sure that they've got daily egg food. You want to have millet there all the
yeah.
time. You want to make sure they always have seed, fresh water, because
Especially if they have a big clutch.
it's like a factory of they've got to keep these babies fed, and they've also got to keep themselves fed. By about day 10 is when you'll start to see pin feathers. And then by day 21-ish, I think, if I'm doing all my math right, yeah,
Yep,
then you'll see birds start to fledge.
yep. Start peeking
Um,
their heads out or fledging down onto the bottom.
yeah, fledging is a risky time for the birds. That's a time they can get hurt or get stepped on or lost or all these things. Especially zebra finches sometimes have a tendency to fledge like not fully cooked, is how I think of it in my head. So they'll come out and they can't fly for a day or two. That's one big advantage if you're doing it cage breeding style, because mom and dad can just feed them. Just
Yeah,
if they come out way early, you know, if you're like, man, it's day 12, that bird doesn't even have feathers and he's out, try to put them back. Um, but if they come out, you know, day 19 instead of day 21, just let mom and dad, you know, make sure they're safe and let
yeah.
mom and dad take care of them where they are, feed them where they are. That mom and dad know what to do. They obviously can't pick them up and put them back like, you know, a cat could pick up its baby by the back of the neck or whatever. They can't do that, but they can go to them, feed them, help take
And
care of them.
and in that stage too, Jay, if you're breeding in a cage in your house or even in an aviary setting, make sure, and even before your birds start breeding, but make sure that your cages are chick proof. And what I mean by that is many times they panic and they try to fit their heads through wires or bars or things like that and can get stuck. So just make sure that there's no big gaps in your wires or in the bars of your cage, things like that. The bottom of the cage, maybe have some newspaper on there so that they're not just their feet aren't just falling through and getting tangled up in the bars, things like that. So just little things you can do to try and safe proof. I think of like my house when you've got little kids and toddlers, you got to child proof it, right? Because things that maybe adults don't do, your kids do that could hurt them. And so similar with the chicks, with your birds, there's things that your adult birds may not do, but the chicks probably will find a way to do it when they first fledge. Those first 1 to 3 days, they're really clumsy. They fly around, chaotically and are bumping into things until they can get their wings underneath them, and then they settle down and kind of get used to the environment. But yeah, those first couple days are critical. Just make sure you've got a safe environment, and that there's not anything that the chicks can hurt themselves or in any way. So
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, their whole world has been this tiny little dark nest box, and all of a sudden they're out in the bright, big blue world.
yeah,
That's got to be overwhelming. The one thing I do, if we're talking about cage breeding specifically, is you can take like mosquito netting, like people use on screened-in porches and things like that, and just wrap that around the cage and either zip tie or twist tie it on. Prevents the babies from getting their heads through, and then you can just take it back. Get it from Home Depot for like $10, and you can take it off and throw it away once the chicks are old enough. Just for those few days.
yeah,
That's an easy thing I've done in the past when I was cage breeding. And then yeah, once they're fledged, typically they're weaned by about 3 weeks after fledging. And you'll know when they're weaned because when they're not weaned, they go up to mom and dad, kind of bend down and wag their head like that and make a huge like rah, 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 noise.
yeah.
And so
You'll hear
eventually
it for sure.
you'll know when they're feeding because you'll hear that noise and then you'll hear it kind of stop as they're being fed. And then once that has stopped and their beak starts to turn orange and everything, um, they're weaned. And usually I would say that's when you need to separate them from mom and
Yeah,
dad.
yeah. They wean quickly, right? So good. That's a great rule of thumb, Jay. Once you start seeing their beaks changing from black to orange, majority of your zebra finches are weaned by that time. And I'm meaning like the parts that touch the feathers of the head, so the beak, once it's touching that, once you can start seeing that orange come in there, then they're probably mature enough to separate from the parents. Zebra finches, they mature quickly. I'm talking 2 3 months, and your males can be breeding females from chicks. And so make sure you're separating them so you don't have inbreeding going. If you're not wanting to breed more, make sure you're separating your males and females, uh, chicks from each other, things like that, because in a couple months they are sexually mature. I still recommend waiting if you're planning to breed those, especially your females. Like I would say, I would not breed my females any sooner than 7 8 months of age, but they do mature really fast, so they're I let them breed a little bit earlier. My other birds, it's usually like 12 months or older before I let, especially the females, breed. So just keep that as a general rule of thumb. Separate them as soon as you can when they wean, prevent inbreeding, and other chicks that you may not be wanting or planning for because they will breed if you have a male and female
Yeah,
together.
and for the sequencing of that, by the time the chicks have fledged and are out flying around like we were talking about, mom's going to try to lay again.
Yeah, she's
So
probably already sitting.
right. So if you want them to stop, once those chicks fledge, take away the nest box right then. It
Yeah,
doesn't hurt the birds. You might find an egg or two on the ground or in the food bowl or whatever. It doesn't hurt the birds. That's the easiest way to stop them from breeding is take away their nesting sites and they'll stop.
yeah,
Um, all right. I guess all of those things are hold true, except in a colony, you have some extra dynamics there, Chris. Like, what are you thinking of if you thought, like, and this is
yeah,
just a colony of zebra finches.
yeah. I'm the only things that I would change. So how to breed them, I wouldn't change anything. And I mean, what we just talked about, you can do individually in a cage or in a colony setting. The other things that come to mind in a colony setting is nest box ratio, right? So you want at least a 2 to 1 nest box ratio to however many pairs you have in the aviary.
So, like,
And
let me clarify that. So, like, if you have three pairs, then you would need six nest
six,
boxes at least,
yeah, yeah,
and also where you put them. You can talk about this, Chris, but where you put them matters.
right, yeah. And zebra finches aren't super picky. They do tend to like the higher or mid range nest boxes, so I'll put them there. But I have seen them nest at the bottom of a plant base, so they are opportunists in when it comes to nesting. But generally speaking, put your nest box higher in corners, in places that they feel more secure. You will, in a colony setting, you'll have a dominant pair. So there's a pecking order with zebra
Right.
finches.
And they're
Uh,
gonna pick that high nest. That's what I was getting
exactly.
to is
Yeah, your dominant pair, they're going to choose what nest they want, and then they'll take that, and then the other birds will take whatever other nest boxes are available. So there is a hierarchy there. They're people label them as aggressive, Jay. I don't say that. I don't think they're aggressive. They just know who is who, right? Who's the dominant pair, who is not. The pecking order is established, and once that's established, I feel like they're pretty good. Like they don't injure other birds. They'll chase each other around. They'll get them away from their nest boxes. They'll select pairs that they want. But they're not going to be plucking feathers until someone's bleeding and dying. For the most part, that they're not that type of aggressive, but they will push each other around. So make sure you've got enough space if you've got a colony of zebra finches. If you've got a small cage and you've got two or three pairs in there, your least dominant pair, they're going to get picked on and they're going to get plucked. And just making sure you have a big enough space for them to get away from everybody, establish their own small territory where their nest box is. That'll help you. They breed really well in colony settings, and I think you can be successful in either or. But yeah, those are the dynamics that come to my mind. Jay, I don't know if you've got anything else for colony setting.
yeah, so I would say like yeah, the when people talk about zebra finches being aggressive, I don't tend to think of them as aggressive towards other species. Um, and then also we've talked about this in previous episodes, but there's a genetic link for those color traits that also you don't just get different colors, you get different dominant traits. So like I find that the lighter colored, the less wild type zebra finches are, the more placid they tend to be in general.
Yeah,
So like you go like to your oranges now, they're super chill. The white varieties, your chestnut flake whites, your pieds, your all rights are a little bit more spicy, but not much. And then by the time you get back to wild type, they I've had some that have been pretty pugnacious,
yeah,
especially towards other zebra finches, and most especially fathers to sons,
yeah,
right? Which in the wild, that's a natural thing they do to prevent inbreeding and protect genetic diversity. But if you're in a cage, the male can't run off and join the young male can't go join a different flock. He's
right.
just stuck there. So by the time they're eating on their own, their flags are starting to yellow up or orange up. That's when you need to separate them out. Um, and then, so yeah, so colony breeding, I try to have all my nest boxes, with a decent space in between them, and then also roughly the same height
Yeah,
or a bunch so that everybody can kind of pick where they want to be, whether they want privacy, whether they want to be on top, whatever it is. It sort of helps eliminate those things. And then be aware that if you colony breed zebra finches, you're gonna get extra pair copulations.
yeah.
They do pair off. They do mate for life. They do not have good morals. So if you have two males and two females, when the other ones aren't looking, they're gonna cross pollinate, so
Yeah.
to speak. So
Cross
just know
pollinate,
that.
and many times you'll have females that will lay eggs in other females' nests too. So you could have a clutch of six eggs, and three of the six eggs could be from two or three different females. If that's the nest that they love and they want, but they're maybe not the dominant pair, they'll sneak in there when they get a chance and lay an egg, and then jump out. So I've seen that happen before as well.
Yeah, so just know if you're breeding for specific traits or specific things or your pairs are related, colony breeding, probably not the right answer because
Right.
it's just not like I said, they do pair, but not good morals.
Yeah.
Um, and then last would be in the mixed aviary setting. So I do that now. I colony breed in a mixed aviary. I have two pairs of zebra finches in a mixed aviary. Um, all the same stuff applies. I would say that um, as a general rule, I don't have a problem with them in a mixed aviary. They are typically not the meanest bird or the nicest bird. They hold their own, but they don't tend to cause me a lot of problems. The only time they really can cause problems is they will pluck, especially like my doves, if they don't have feathers, they'll go get feathers.
Yeah.
But it's not like malicious plucking. They they're like, I need that, sorry, and they'll take
Yeah.
it. And then the other thing is just like I talked about with the colony breeding, they are my riskiest bird for hybridizations.
Yeah.
Any of the other finches that will let them, they will give it a try. So if you have birds like your masked grass finches or your shaft tails that you're not trying to have interbreed, be careful with the zebras because they'll try.
Yeah.
So the best way to do that is to have those other birds have really established pairs. And then, we need to do an episode on mules hybrids. We haven't done it
Yeah.
yet, but it's
Yeah,
not
we
the
haven't.
end of the world. Certainly not something we would ever do intentionally, but it does happen. It's happened to me. It's happened to Chris. It's happened to Chris's brother. It happens to everybody. But try to keep that to a minimum. But just know that in a mixed aviary, that is a risk you're taking.
Yep, very high possibility. I would probably say the only thing I'd add to that, Jay, in the mixed aviary setting. So this year I had four breeding pairs of zebra finches, and I tried to pair them off, two pairs on each side of the aviary, so that
Hmm.
they weren't too overpowering or of my other species. I would say they mix really well with shafttails, maskgrass finches, Amadina finches. All of those birds can hold their own. They have similar levels of energy, similar styles of breeding, and they can hold their own against each other if they're trying to defend their nest boxes, things like that. Pairs that may not do as good with zebra finches, your Gouldian finches, your parrot finches, any of your smaller waxbills, because your zebra finches are a little bit more uh, overpowering. They're more nosy if they see a nest box that they like and it's a more docile species. The zebra finch is probably going to win and they'll take that nest box over. So keep that in mind. If you're breeding some of those other finches or wanting to breed them in that mixed aviary setting, I would say do like what Jay has and have two or less pairs of zebra finches so that they're not as overpowering. Make sure you have lots of nest box options, and that you're being intentional on what species you put in there with your zebra finches if you're wanting success for all of your species together in that mixed aviary setting. So just some things to keep in mind there. Like this coming year, I'm actually going to be separating all my zebra finches and just breeding them together in a colony setting apart. And then I'm going to be doing my parrot finches and Gouldian finches separate in their own individual colony settings in hopes that I can get more successful breeding from those species. Just being intentional on that breeding piece and separating the zebra finches out because they do tend to take over the aviary a little bit more than I want sometimes. So,
All right. Well, I think that does it for the round two of zebra finches. Um,
hey,
go get go get one of these. Go get one of these. Go to New
these things are
Zooland's
huge.
website. I'll
Look at
link it
that.
below.
Look how big it is.
Yeah,
These are big boxes. I mean, this is the big option. But yeah, go to the link below. Go to New Zealand. Subscribe. Get this puppy. Super excited. And if you guys haven't watched our unboxing video that we just posted this week, go back, take a peek at it. Got some awesome stuff in here to highlight and showcase. And all this could be your guys's if you subscribe. So,
absolutely. All right. Chris, if they had zebra finch questions, where could they find you?
yeah, reach out to me. PM me on Instagram, birdnerd4. That's the best place. And I usually respond quickest. If you don't have Instagram, I also post on YouTube and Facebook as Bird Nerd. So reach out to me there if you have any questions. Love to hear your guys' thoughts and your voices. And love interacting with you guys. Jay, how about you? Where can they reach out to you?
Let's see, I'm on YouTube, Instagram, which is the best place to reach me. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Reddit, I'm on Threads, which sucks, and I am now on TikTok. So if you can't find me, I don't know what to tell you. It's the Javiary or the underscore Javiary on all those. We really appreciate y'all. Use code BirdBrains, 10% off, and we'll
Yeah.
catch y'all in the next one.
See you guys.